Good afternoon, everyone. I think it's very appropriate that this session was competing with the ice cream. Um, Clearly, we need to cool off. It's really great to be here with you today. And this session, as my colleague Marla mentioned, is focusing on gender and heat stress. Now, I think in many aspects, this whole forum has been discussing and will continue to discuss different aspects of how heat waves are having an impact on women. But this afternoon, we thought we would focus and sort of drill down on some of the more specific impacts. So before we begin, we have two short questions for you. So if you haven't yet done so, please scan the Slido QR code to participate. So if I can have, I don't know, can I have the Slido code up on? Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much. So while you're scanning, I want to tell you a little bit about how this session is being organized. So we have a presentation by Bushra Afrin, who is the North Dhaka's first heat officer, and she is also working with Arshrock. This will be followed by a panel featuring 3 additional speakers, Abhiyan Tiwari, who's the lead of the Health Climate Resilience program at the Natural Resources Defense Council in India. And this will be followed by Anna Bonnell, who's an associate professor with the London School of Hygiene and Tropical Medicine. And then Lakshmi Sharma, who is here at ADB, a senior urban development specialist. And both Lakshmi and Anna will be participating virtually. So in this panel, we'll also allocated sufficient time for Q&A. So please also start entering your questions in Slido. So the first question is up on Slido, and I can see some people are already answering the question. So the question is, to what extent do you believe women and men experience heat stress differently? So so far, 55% of you think moderately, somewhat, don't know, have never thought about it. Okay, you're in the right place. And not at all. So hopefully those who have not thought about it yet or don't know will come out of this session with a better idea of how heat stress is impacting women. So just give it a couple more seconds here to see. So I think most people think moderately and somewhat and don't know or have never thought about it is kind of even. Okay, let's see how people sort of stay within those categories or maybe change their minds at the end of the session. Okay, so the second question, let's see if people, okay, so the second question is, how are increasing and longer heat waves impacting your country or your community? So, I think maybe that was from the test question that we were, because these responses seem not quite right. We know it's raining women all the time, especially at the Gender Forum, right? So, but I think, not quite. So maybe this one is not working. We'll come back to it later. Okay, so thanks for submitting your responses to Slido. I think this gives us a good place to start from. So as we have heard, climate change is increasing the intensity and frequency and duration of heat waves. And in Asia, in the Pacific, we have approximately 2-3 billion people that could be highly vulnerable to heat waves. And as we have all felt it this year, 2023 will be the warmest year on record and is currently 1.43 degrees Celsius above the pre-industrial average. So the temperatures are currently 1.43 Celsius above pre-industrial averages. So, and we have seen the really devastating impact of these heat waves. We have seen many deaths, as well as the many people who have lost their livelihoods, and even more that have been displaced. So why do we need to focus on gender and heat stress? And I think the response to this is because while heat stress impacts everyone, it impacts women differently. And we need to understand how it impacts women differently in order to develop appropriate adaptation responses. So today we will hear from our speakers about how heat stress has gendered impacts, how the heat stress is worsening women's health, how it's impacting women's livelihoods, how it's reducing women's productivity and increasing women's care burden. And I think quite importantly, I hope that we can also have a conversation about how gender norms are actually influencing the disproportionate impact on women. So Bushra will start with an overall scene-setting presentation, and which will be followed by a panel discussion and a Q&A at the end. So Bushra, would you like to come up and share with us your presentation or your experiences so far in Bangladesh?
These are very sensitive mics. Thank you so much, Zani, and ADB for having me here. It's really wonderful to stand before you all today. I'm Bushra Afriin, and I'm the Chief Heat Officer of Dhaka North. And today, I'm really excited to discuss with you my work on to reduce heat vulnerability in informal settlements while empowering the women who live there to become agents of change. Does this clicker not work? It's not working. Nope, it's not working. Where am I supposed to be pointing it? This time doesn't count, right? We're going to start over, right? Okay. Can somebody help me with this? Okay. I'm not going to click anything. So how was your day? Yeah, it was hot. It's really hot. I think it's a very similar experience, but Dhaka right now, it's cooler right now. It rained all of a sudden, and everything cooled down. So it's cooler in Dhaka right now than it is here. But it wasn't just a week ago. Yeah. Yeah. Oh, are we? Yes. Okay, we're back. Can we start the stopwatch? Okay, great. Hi, I'm Bushra Afriin, and I'm the Chief Heat Officer and today in Dhaka North. And today I'm really excited to discuss with you my work to reduce heat vulnerability in informal settlements while empowering the women who live there to become agents of change. So like me, if you grew up in Dhaka, you are no stranger to hot and humid weather. But that is what makes extreme heat in Dhaka so dangerous. We are so used to heat that we often don't recognize when it becomes deadly. As you see in the slide, there is a very narrow range between when our bodies begin to react to heat and when we are in danger of becoming seriously sick. When we start to get warmer, at first our blood is pulled away from our vital organs. So that means blood is pulled away from our heart, from our kidneys, and sent to our skin, and that's how we start sweating. It's a natural defense mechanism, and it cools us down. But what happens if our core temperature keeps on rising? If that happens, our health worsens, as you can clearly see in this slide. At this crucial stage, this is where you need to cool down. This is when it's so important to know the signs of heat stroke and be able to have access to cooling, because otherwise a person can experience irreversible damage to their organs and even death. Okay. Heat in Dhaka is different now. and so much more dangerous than it was just a few decades ago. And the reason is the combination of climate change, which is causing longer and hotter summers, and the way that the city has grown. And these images show that in just 2 decades, so from 2001 to 2021, a portion of the city has undergone rapid and unplanned urbanization at the cost of extreme deforestation and complete loss of water bodies. And this has happened across Dhaka city, and all of those places are now urban heat islands. There is so much thermal generation happening within our city, as well as like a massive expansion of built-up surfaces that have pushed temperatures to the brink, much higher than its surrounding areas. I'm talking about Dhaka. And by 2041, only 14% of Dhaka city is estimated to remain free from extreme heat vulnerability. Only 14%. And that number will get smaller unless we don't curb emissions. Now, there are several reasons for the rapid urbanization in Dhaka. As a megacity, there are over 10 million people living in Dhaka North alone, and over 600,000 of them are living in informal settlements across the city. And that number is growing every day because you have 2,000 people migrating to the city on a daily basis, 84% of them of whom are climate migrants. And if you're a climate migrant, it's very likely that you're now living in an informal settlement and dealing with extreme heat. Globally, 2023 was the hottest year ever recorded in human history, and temperatures in Dhaka North were no exception. The city experienced its hottest day in 6 decades during the heat wave in Ramadan, where people did not drink water, right, making them more vulnerable. And then that temperature kept coming back repeatedly during months of rolling heat waves and constant power outages that left so many people living in urban poor communities without access to cooling. And growing up, this makes me really sad, but growing up, we used to sing about the 6 seasons of Bangladesh. But this year, Dhaka experienced summer for over 8 months. While the official record-breaking readings showed 40.6 degrees Celsius, temperatures in informal settlements were much higher. This is definitely because of the lack of vegetation, shade, as well as like the congested way the buildings have been built, as well as a lot of heat-trapping materials in there. Similarly, road surfaces temperatures also saw a huge rise, like it reached up to 60 degrees, which made people who worked on the streets, people who lived on the streets, and people who had long commutes walking to their place of work very dangerous for them. So while heat can be dangerous to everyone, it does not affect everyone equally. And unfortunately, this problem doesn't seem like it's going to stop anytime soon. As I said, instead, it's only going to get more and more hotter as and you can see that clearly in this chart. The amount of hot days is going to increase 6-fold than what it is now. And some people are physiologically more vulnerable to extreme heat, like women, children, people with pre-existing health conditions. But others are vulnerable because they don't have access to cooling. And too often there is an overlap between these two groups. And that is particularly true for women living in informal settlements. And these women face systemic challenges that make them more vulnerable. For example, many of them can't afford to take a day off when it's too hot outside to keep working outside. They have to constantly choose between their health and their family. Young girls are vulnerable too, because climate-induced loss of livelihood has caused so many families around Bangladesh to marry off their underage daughters. And these are young girls who are coming into Dhaka with their husbands, and they have no support system, limited education, and they've therefore very little adaptive capacity to endure or to adapt essentially against the stresses and shocks of extreme heat. Also, the bulk of the time taken up by unpaid labor, unpaid domestic work, makes it so much harder for women and girls to access or succeed in their workplace, while also reducing the time they have to take care of themselves. During heat waves, women and girls did not get any respite at night. When I worked with women in the informal communities, their homes had been baking in the sun all day long, and they became even hotter at night. Nobody could sleep. Each night, all these women were wandering the streets with their children in their arms, trying to rock them so that they'd be able to sleep. When people are not given a respite from heat, they don't get a chance to recover from heat stress. So what can we do? As Chief Heat Officer of Dhaka North, my job is to develop and coordinate a unified response to heat stress. Upon taking on this role, my biggest priority was to find ways to cool the city in places with the most heat-vulnerable populations. And we all know the nature-based solutions are one of the most effective ways to do that. It became really evident that these communities really lacked access to green spaces. So it was critical to bring women, since they are on the front lines, to bring women of these communities to the table when discussing the heat solutions of their settlements. But in order to make the participation possible, we had to ensure that meetings and training sessions were held both online and in person, at times that were convenient for the women and did not conflict with or did not overburden them with their already everyday responsibilities. They were free to bring their children to these meetings so that they didn't have to arrange childcare. We provided full meals as well as provided transportation costs. So historically, because of these barriers, women in these communities often had a hard time being included, and they were often marginalized. But this time, they were agents of change with a seat at the table from the very beginning. They were equal partners in the work that directly affected their communities and their well-being. And their insights were really critical to ensure the success of this tree planting project. You can see me right there, and we're having lots of discussions with community members. For instance, whereas we had initially thought, okay, there's lack of vegetation and shade, let's just go in and plant a lot of shade-bearing trees. But these women highlighted the importance of planting fruit-bearing trees, which would further motivate their community members to nurture them better. So in the past 2.5 months, we have successfully planted 5,500 trees across 15 settlements. So being able to have an open dialogue with these communities allowed us to gain a deeper understanding into what they face when it comes to existing problems. For instance, when we were doing field visits, a lot of things came to light. Mothers told me that their children were, in one of the communities, mothers told me that their children were taking a longer route to walk to school because the shorter way was unsafe because they had to cross a very busy road. So I immediately reached out to the city, and within a day we were back there. As you can see on the picture, we were trying to put up signs and markers that would allow children to cross the road safely. We're also working on installing a speed bump there and a zebra crossing. I cannot stress this enough, but during a heat wave, it's so important to minimize heat exposure, and that can save the lives of young children. This is a continuing conversation, but moving forward, action should not just be taken on behalf of the vulnerable, but with their full participation. The people who are the most affected by heat are not just its victims. They have critical knowledge that is so essential to creating the most sustainable solutions. Thank you. Right on time. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Would you want to join us up here, Abby? Yes. Great. Thank you very much for that really insightful presentation. I think it gave us all a really good perspective on sort of the issues related to heat stress, particularly in a city like Dhaka North. You know, we have also joining us online, I hope, we have Anna and Lakshmi. So if you can bring them up, great. And we're joined here by Abhiyant as well. Okay, great. Welcome, Lakshmi, and I don't see Anna, but hopefully she can. Is Anna online? Okay, great, because we're beginning with a question for Anna. So, so Anna, heat stress impacts women's health in many ways, but we know that heat stress during pregnancy poses even more risk to the mother and developing fetus. Can you share the ways in which heat impacts women's reproductive health and pregnancy outcomes? And what do you think might be effective interventions that we should be thinking about? Oh, there you are. I can see you now. Welcome.
Hi, thank you. So as we've heard, extreme heat is particularly dangerous for vulnerable groups, and pregnant women are a particular vulnerable group. And so it affects both the mother and the unborn child. And if we consider the effects on the mother first, there was a recent study from California, actually, which looked at severe maternal illness. So that includes risk of bleeding, risk of clotting, risk of sepsis, so life-threatening conditions. And what they found was that when women were exposed to extreme heat during their pregnancy, that risk of these severe life-threatening conditions increased by 28%. A further study from South Africa also found increased risk to the mother. So again, talking about the mother here in terms of developing high blood pressure, dangerously high blood pressure during pregnancy when exposed to high temperatures during the first trimester. And if we move on to think about the unborn child, the effects of the unborn child, the effect of heat is different depending on what stage of pregnancy you are when you are exposed. So if you're exposed to extreme heat in the first trimester, that can increase your risk of miscarriage and losing the baby, as well as the increased risk of congenital abnormalities, particularly heart abnormalities, and problems with the development of the placenta and the development of the child, which increases the risk of having a small baby when they're born. And if you're exposed to extreme heat later in pregnancy, that then increases the risk of having a preterm birth, a stillbirth, and a low birth weight baby. And when we think about the numbers of this, if we put all the studies together, if you're exposed to extreme heat towards the end of your pregnancy, you increase your risk of preterm birth by 16%. And we know that preterm birth is the leading cause of mortality in neonates and under 1-year-olds. So it has a serious impact both for the mothers and the unborn child. Unfortunately, this area has mostly been neglected in terms of kind of thinking about the research to understand why this is happening, what's the underlying mechanisms. And so to date, there isn't a very strong evidence base around what would be an effective interventions to try and reduce these risks. But what we can say is from other populations, so for example, there's been a lot of work done on occupational heat exposure. What was effective in those situations was highlighting particularly dangerous times of day when you're exposed to heat, changing and modifying your behavior to reduce your exposure, and education around sort of personal protective mechanisms that you can take. So for example, ensuring that you drink plenty, ensuring that you rest, that you change your work schedule. So we think that these things could be effective in maternal health and protecting mothers, but there is a lot of work that still needs to be done to understand what sort of an overall bundle or package of care could look like to ensure that women are kept protected when they're pregnant. Thank you.
Thank you, Anna. I think those are really sort of sobering information and that you have found through your research, but I think it's very helpful in terms of helping us think through what might be some ways for us to begin addressing sort of the particular risks that pregnant women face during heat waves. So I want to turn to Abhiyant now, who has done a great deal of work in India and in other countries and working on heat action plans. You have done work also with women's organizations to ensure that those heat action plans respond to the needs of women, particularly those most marginalized. So can you share a little bit about how the process has evolved of heat action planning and what have been some of the lessons learned?
Sure. Thank you so much, Johnny, and thanks ADB for hosting, a session on this topic as well in this entire forum. Let me begin with asking to the audience, you can just raise your hand. How many of you know if your city or state has a heat action plan? Do you know that your city has a heat action plan, or is there a heat action plan that your city has? That answers. Anyway, so yeah, Johnny, the process has been long, starting from, we started from India, developed the first South Asian heat action plan in the city of Ahmedabad, which is in the western part of the country, which is relatively hot with dry climate. Back in 2009-10, and we had a devastating heat wave event in 2010, and that was the trigger point. But when developing countries and underdeveloped countries still have the challenges of other health burden, communicable, non-communicable diseases, bringing in something like heat wave and addressing it through the health sector is another challenge. So that was a challenge. We accepted that, and we did try it a lot. Starting from making the key stakeholders, particularly the government, recognize heat as a challenge, and to address that issue, to coming to a level where now we are reaching out the targeted vulnerable communities, thanks to the our partners that we work in India. One of them are sitting here also, Mahila Housing Trust. We have been doing tremendous work to address the vulnerabilities particularly, but there is a lot to be done. So what you see here, a picture, when we started back in 2013, the first heat action plan was launched in India, in South Asia, I would say rather. The early warnings were coming through, in an international agency, and then it got the national meteorology or hydro and meteorology agencies got involved, and they also started implementing it. But we wanted to ensure that it reaches out to the last and the marginalized and the community, to the one at the bottom of the pyramid, and that's where such self-help groups and such organizations are helping us. What you see here is an early warning, issued by the meteorology department, getting to the targeted vulnerable community. One of our recent work in the city of Jodhpur, which is in the, again, western part of the India in the state of Rajasthan, is a tier 2 city, a small city, where we did a vulnerability assessment, ward level within city, a ward level heat vulnerability assessment, where gender is one of the component, women particularly, like what is the proportion of the women in a particular ward, and based on those vulnerability indexes, we decided to provide the interventions. So this is one of the slum community that our partners closely work in the city of Jodhpur, where the early warnings are being, reached out, are being provided to the slum, women who are particularly, because of the double whammy, as my friend Bushra was mentioning, are exposed to. Women are not just exposed to the outdoor heat, they are also exposed to the indoor heat, which is even more dangerous. There are a lot of stories that I can share here, but looking at the paucity of time, I'll stop here. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I think we all clearly, have a lot to learn about the experience from India, who have been one of the leaders in developing heat action plans from, I think maybe 10 years, maybe even longer experience, maybe? Yeah. So, and now I want to turn to Lakshmi, who's actually calling in from I believe you're in Bangladesh, Lakshmi, and Lakshmi is an urban specialist, and she has been working on designs, project designs that help people manage heat stress as a critical element that needs to be incorporated in ADB projects. So Lakshmi, can you tell us about what some designs are that you have incorporated into your projects?
Thank you, Johnny. I'd just like to refer and thank you to the Anna to saying about the evidence-based interventions to come. So today I would like to share my two examples, particularly. Actually, one was a quite old one. It's like 12 years ago. One summer afternoon, I visited one of the Makara towns in the southern part of Nepal as a part of the review mission, and it was a very well performing water supply utilities, which was community based. But it was a temperature was quite high. Being me as a middle hill girl of Nepal going to the southern part, I feel really felt about the heat, and it was really difficult for me to do the supervisions or the meetings with meetings there. So what I felt was I noticed a few women because they were free during the daytime, and they approaching to the water bill to pay the water bill to the town, this water supply office. So, but I really feel sad about to seeing them without the umbrella, and they are very much covered with their these unsensitive to the heat kind of dresses were there. Then I started to talking with them, and they really said that it is really a hard time during the daytime to come. So what I noticed was the town office had no sitting arrangements, no water ponds for them to drinking, no any green spaces, neither the toilets, which is conditioned with the waters and thing. So I feel really sympathy with the empathy. Then I immediately discussed with the implementing agency, and they started to do the incorporating the design changes of the offices to make it more green space and the shades and the sitting arrangements and water points. That was the first time I really feel that this temperature increase will really be affecting the women's being of my personal experience also. And I also, after that, what happened was that there was a sense of the ownership come from the women's, because the water utility was giving the importance and value to their needs and the vulnerable. And that the point of the town office started to be like socializing places for women also. So leading to the increased social capital. That was a one experience. While reviewing the things, we can identify the intervention to addressing the increasing hate. At that time, there is not really the issue, discussions about the climate change assessment and thing. So I just like to share another example of the Bangladesh, which is a recent one. While I was preparing the Bangladesh towns, coastal towns climate resilience project, we conducted the several studies to derive the lessons from the climate change perspective to inform the design. That's so how we can address. One of the lessons is to ensure good understanding of a climate risks. What we understood is that just recently that the first speaker has mentioned about the increasing of a temperature on that part. So, so in that case, the explicit focus was on the building the resilience of a woman and the vulnerable group. So we also did a gender analysis, and we also observed that the public space, green spaces are not being, means they are being constrained for them to be accessible. So on the other hand, the green and public spaces are very important to help to adopt and manage the heat stresses for women, which was actually COVID-19 has a coronavirus has also given the value of these green spaces also, where the women can go and have their social distancing and to have a mental health to be addressing on that. So immediately we identified this, and we worked with the government of Bangladesh for the unified approach and supported the local government engineering department in preparing the guidelines for the climate resilient, gender and socially inclusive public open spaces in cities and towns of Bangladesh, and which now we are replicating to the Nepal, as well as since I have mentioned the open and green space will mitigate the heat island effects of the cities. And we are increasingly supporting the green and the open space improvement, greening cities initiatives, and a gender responsive tourism access improvement. So just to mention the two projects that we have really focusing on these items are the Urban Resilience and Livability Improvement Project in Nepal, which is going to the board this month itself, and the proposed Bangladesh Naranganj project, which include these features. among the other urban projects. I will stop here now. Thank you. Over to you.
Thank you very much, Lakshmi. I think that the evolution of sort of the learning through your projects from 12 years ago when you were working on that project in Nepal and the Terai, to Bangladesh, and now to Nepal. I think it's really great to see how all along the way you've been sort of learning and incorporating sort of new designs to respond to increasing heat stress. So I want to turn to Bushra because you're the first heat officer in Dhaka North, and your role, from what we have seen, is really critically important. So what do you think are some of the challenges that you're facing in bringing different stakeholders to work together on this really, key adaptation challenge that we're facing?
Well, some of the challenges that we've faced is historically and encouraged by bureaucratic and political steps. I will call them steps for now. Because of these issues, people in Bangladesh and in Dhaka have often worked in silos, Dhaka especially more than other cities. Nobody takes that first step to reach out to another governing body or another public office and discusses and collaborates. That hadn't happened until very recently. It's so important to collaborate and get to know what everybody's working on. A lot of the times people are setting up duplicate, the work becomes duplicated not just twice but like thrice and like multiple times, and it's a waste of resources and a waste of time. And oftentimes when people, there are a lot of people who want to engage, and there's a lot of, but historically, like, academics have just stayed in their lane, and politicians have stayed in their lane, and private sector. So now we're seeing more of a cross-sectoral collaboration, which is amazing. But I think it needs to happen more and more, and it needs to happen at an equal level. There are a lot of power dynamics at play, and also there's the patriarchy. Who here is familiar with the patriarchy? Yeah, that's what I thought. So, like, for example, one of the challenges we had is when we did this tree planting project, and we decided that, you know what, we want women to take the lead here because they are at the front lines. In some communities, men really revolted, and, you know, they went around and they ripped up the trees that we planted, that the women and all of us together we had planted. And then we had to go in and and we realized that, you know, this is still a society that has certain societal norms, and, you know, we can't pretend that they don't exist. They do exist, and we have to work with them and be inclusive. So while in some communities, men were very appreciative of the fact that, you know, we're working with a lot of these people, some banks, and their wives and their sisters were attending these meetings out in the city with, you know, high-level officials and executives. Some men were really, you know, some family members were very supportive, and the other male family members in other communities were not as supportive and were very critical. And so we then had to have a lot of dialogue with them and basically, in simple language, soothe their hurt egos. I'm being very blunt right now, but it was essentially that. That is basically what I would say has been the challenges so far. And it's also lack of data, I would say. So, but for example, I'm talking about climate migrants, like, we have data on how many climate migrants are there in the city, but we don't have data on how much of that how many of them are women, how many of them are underage women. We're working on collecting that data, but it wasn't until just a few months ago that the city started having its own data to understanding the relationship between air pollution and heat index. Like, that's at such a primary level data, but the city didn't have that either. So we still have a long way to go when it comes to building a database on the relevant data that we do need to be more effective in our work and to bring more people together. I hope that answers.
And right on time as well. Yeah, yes. So no, thank you for that. I think one of the things that hasn't come up until now, when you've mentioned it, is the relationship between air pollution and heat waves, and I think that's another really critical consideration for us to be thinking about. The World Meteorological Association earlier this year released a report that focused on that very relationship. And I think if you're interested in this, it's really worth checking it out, because I think it's fills in a data gap that until now we hadn't really been thinking about. And so I guess then it's a good transition to Anna, given that your work has been focusing on health. And so the question to you, Anna, is what kind of differentiated approaches are required to protect women and their children from heat stress, and how do we need to strengthen health systems to meet this emerging trend? So over to you.
Thank you. Yeah. It's a very big question. So I guess ultimately, what the only way that we are going to protect women and children is really to stop burning fossil fuels, because at our current rate of emissions, extreme heat is here. We know that if we continue to emit at the same rate that we're emitting now, extreme heat is only going to get worse and only going to affect people and people's health much more going forward. So I think ultimately that has to be like a very clear goal for everybody, that this needs to be acted on now. But in the mitigation adaptation kind of conversation around climate action, as we've heard and been discussing already, we need to adapt now. We cannot wait. We cannot do one and then the other. It cannot be a separate approach. We must bring them together. And so although the health systems need to mitigate their emissions and sort of change, they also need to adapt and build climate resilience into the way they approach climate related disasters as well as any other disaster. So what I mean here really is that sort of echoing a little bit from what Lakshmi and Bushra have already said, we need to take an intersectional approach where we take a very holistic view. We look at many different aspects, but ultimately we have to put women and children at the center of the action that we take. And then kind of, I guess, digging into some of the details that we could use, I think it's ultimately important to think there is not going to be one simple solution to this going forward. And in fact, it's going to be a series of steps that will be taken on many different aspects of the way that the health is maintained. But also that it's not going to be the same solution in different places. And so, for example, some of the things that we need to think about in the health system is building climate resilience within the health system. So, for example, I'm based in West Africa, in the Gambia, and when there's a heat wave, it always coincides with lots of power cuts and energy cuts. And so you have this combination of extreme heat in the home, extreme heat in the health facilities, but then you don't have the resilience within the health systems to still be able to deliver, provide have the electricity available to provide the care that's needed. It affects the power, the supply chain and the delivery of medicines across the country with extreme heat, putting those things at risk as well. And that sort of applies not just to extreme heat, but to other extreme weather events such as flooding and hurricanes and things that needs to be taken into account into the way that the health systems are designed and kind of altered to help us live in our changed reality. And then other things that can be done in terms of improving the health of individual vulnerable groups. I think we can think about it in different steps that we could take. So at an individual level, as I mentioned, we could talk about education, individual actions that can be done to reduce your risk. But as we've already discussed, we have to recognize that this is not going to be possible for certain vulnerable groups. So altering your work schedule or not going out into the sun and working during particularly hot times may not be possible if your work is if without that happening, you will be unable to provide for your family. So again, I think that's why we have to make sure that we center it around the real lived reality of those who are experiencing this extreme heat. And then kind of leading on from what Bushra said about nature-based solutions and urban action that can be done, I think there's a whole host of things that can be done to make our urban environment more livable. And it seems so simple because we all want a livable future, but cities are not designed to be livable now. In fact, they're designed to, I don't know really what the focus is, but it's like they've taken on their own crazy mentality, and we don't focus on the people who are actually living there and make it a safe, happy place for people to live. And I think a lot of action could be done just to bring back green spaces, bring back blue spaces, making the environment kind of a more enjoyable place. And you see from the medical literature that if you're exposed, if you have access to more green space, then you are safer in terms of your health. You're less at risk of extreme heat, you have better well-being, you have better mental health, and all of those things come together. So that would be my thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. I agree with everything that you've said about sort of the need also for cities to be places where people can be happy and have green spaces and be able to breathe. Yeah, 100%. And I think now, if I can turn to Abhiyant, the heat action plans we can develop them, and like many policy, papers out there, they can stay as plans and be put up on a shelf and not necessarily be implemented. So can you talk about sort of what are some of the challenges in implementing these plans, but more importantly, what do we need to do in order to support communities, cities, sectors to implement these action plans?
Yeah, thank you so much. In fact, that's a very important question because we also recently had a review done by one of the organizations in India on the heat action plans in India, and it found out that most of the plans were on paper only, and there were gaps like what I mentioned about the vulnerability assessment. Most of the heat action plans didn't have the local vulnerability assessment done, or didn't have the finance mechanism linked to the implementation of the heat action plan. While we were talking about the future ready cities, I was just, while coming from the airport yesterday to the hotel, I was stuck for more than 15 minutes in a condo outside a condo on a road which had this title Future Ready District or something, Greenfield or something. They have a title Future Ready District, and I was stuck for more than 15 minutes in the traffic. I was just imagining what could happen in a summer if somebody is driving a bike and stuck in that traffic. Well, that was just my experience about the future readiness. Challenges with heat action plans is that heat, despite being, we all know that if there is one hazard, which is for sure, is getting exaggerated and gonna get exaggerated, getting more intense and severe because of climate change. There is no, ounce of doubt on the impact of climate change, human, induced climate change on heat getting more severe. It is just heat among all other hazards, torrential rainfalls, floods, or any other hydrometeorological hazard. Heat, we for sure know that it is because of getting more intense because of climate change. Despite that, majority of the countries across the world do not recognize heat as a notified disaster. No. Right? That's why you don't know whether your city has a heat action plan or not. So that is something as a bigger challenge globally. But then there are opportunities. Cities are working on it. Countries are recognizing it as an imminent challenge and a challenge for future. There are more and more consortiums and organizations coming together, both globally, nationally, subnationally. For example, Global Health Information Network that I'm part of, the USROX, Heat Resilience Center. They all are putting together effort to, make evidence-based advocacy to address this issue, because the challenges are humongous. When we talk about, who is more vulnerable to heat, there is no doubt on gender. There is no doubt that women are more vulnerable to heat, not just because of the physiology, but also because of the social and cultural practices, right? I mean, I'm pretty sure that many of you women here also who are well off might be keeping, you might not know, but you might be keeping yourself dehydrated, not dehydrated, but not consuming water when you are traveling. Huh? Just because you might not have access to the safe toilet, a clean toilet, right? Now imagine about a slum women who do not even have a toilet inside the house, or women in the rural areas. They tend to keep themselves. Same happened in Ramadan, right? If anyone has any doubt that heat can affect you or not, just go and Google or YouTube. On YouTube, go and check the 2015 Karachi heat wave. You will be shocked with the videos and images of the hospitals. Hospitals and morgues had to put the board outside. I mean, I saw, that was very, heartening for me. I saw a board outside the morgue which said, "Sorry, no room for dead bodies." So it's not just COVID that can make such situation. Heat can definitely make that situation, and it will make. So challenges are humongous. But good part is that more and more countries are now recognizing it. More and more evidence is getting built upon, and all that we need is to have better heat governance, which is the missing part here, and that is also an opportunity. So have, US and many parts in the world, in Europe, they have started with heat regulations, heat, acts on heat, governing the heat, both in health sector, in infrastructure and other parts. It's not just health that is getting affected because of heat. Now it is the economy that is getting affected by heat. Last year in India, we had seen the impact of heat on agriculture, on power sector, and that has happened in many parts in Pakistan and Bangladesh also. So what we need is a better heat governance that can regulate this multi-sectoral approach, response to the rising temperature, and not just see it as in silo as a response from disaster or only, health sector. So yeah, that's something I think is more important.
Thank you very much for really highlighting sort of some of the implementation issues. I want to pick up on something that you said, which is really that we are probably not even counting the number of deaths that are heat related. And I think that contributes to, governments and communities not really fully understanding the huge impact that this is having. So I think, Bushra, we have been talking about sort of some of the challenges in implementation and so on. But, since you have just recently started your mandate, 5 years from now, what would you like to have achieved as a heat officer?
Well, everything that he said. I think we so right before I came here and when I was working on this presentation, I asked a lot of different people at a lot of different levels of government to give me data on the excess deaths that happened during the hottest year ever recorded in human history. And I was very disappointed to know that they didn't keep this data because it wasn't significant enough, unlike COVID. But I think it's 5 years from now, I would like that data. I would like to see that data. But 5 years from now, I'd also like Dhaka to be at the stage where nobody has to die from heat. I want there to be protection for women, children, outdoor workers, so heat insurance schemes. There should be power accessibility, especially nobody should have to, during a heat wave, nobody should have their power cut off. In Bangladesh, it's very just like she was saying, Anna was saying that what happened in Gambia, it happened in Bangladesh too. It happened in Dhaka too. And affluent neighborhoods got their power back much earlier than lower income neighborhoods. So access to power, access to cooling, and effective strategies like early warning systems that combined with effective governance could, as Bhaya was saying, that it would really transform how people considered heat, how people thought about heat. And lastly, I think, we need to, like, I'm already starting our work on comprehending like what could a heat adaptation plan for Dhaka North look like. But 5 years later, I want that, like, I'm dreaming of the day where, you know, the national government will be like, let us have a heat adaptation plan as well. Like Bangladesh have a heat adaptation plan, not just for Dhaka North, but for all the towns, all the cities, all the rural lands that are being affected by heat. When I first talked to the Bangladesh Meteorological Department, so pretty soon after I was appointed as CHO, I found out that they had historically been told to only consider and only pay attention to weather changes in the rural agricultural sector, not in the city. They were just not focused or they were not aligned with the city's temperature changes at all. And I asked them, well, why, like, do you not, why isn't there focus on this? But we were having heat waves. Like, well, we haven't gotten that direction yet. That was the response I received during a heat wave. So there is a lot of scope. There's a lot of opportunity to work with the health departments to start building that practice of paying attention to heat, taking heat seriously. Since my appointment in March, was it May or March or April, sometime it feels like forever. But since then, there have been a lot of conversations on heat, and I'm really grateful for that. But there's so much more to be done. We have to, not just at a government level, but we have to do community outreach, because as I said in my speech, that living in this country, you're just not used to taking heat seriously. So I think that's the first step: public awareness, especially among vulnerable people, and work with them to figure out what are the best solutions for them that would enable them to fight back against heat and to protect themselves and their kids from heat.
Thank you very much. I want to end with a question to my colleague Lakshmi, and asking her, what can an institution like ADB do, you know, through our work in countries in the region that are really, you know, 6 out of the 10 most affected countries by heat are in our region. So what can ADB do to really, through our projects, to address some of the things that you've heard about today? And I guess, given that you're an urban specialist, maybe, you know, focusing on the urban related issues that you've heard today.
Okay, thank you so much. So, and then I'm also enlightened with the heat-related issues and challenges. Based on my experience, sub-project level specific intervention have very much limited impact. It can be piloted normally when the genders or the other social projects is coming, we come up with a demonstrations effects kind of a thing. But it has, as I mentioned, it has a limited impact, and to moving forward for the impactful and the sustained changes, we need a very transformational, systematic way of doing things, like a transformational intervention through empowering and the supporting the urban local bodies, because they had the mandate to provide the basic services to and take care of their populations itself. Just to go back to the issues and challenges that we have here. So giving an example with the Nepal itself. So there is and then another thing I just want to mention is that it was briefly to touch about the labor productivity. So we really need to sensitize and make aware of the local government and the government. The public awareness has been there also. But before how we do those things, so we need to have a very sound the climate change assessment. We need to make because not to make a plan just to sake of a making plan. They need to be really on board to bring the plans on. They need to be part and parcel of the plan preparation itself. So the stakeholder engagement is a very important part on itself. So giving example of I'm starting with the Nepal project itself. So we had this climate change assessment, and we are building on these decarbonizations and the risk-informed urban master planning. With this, the heat action plan will be the part and parcel of the bigger picture of the climate change action plans, because one of the major risks is on the vulnerability is the heat increase, also temperature increase in case of Nepal. So with that, it will need to bring the institutional changes. Until and unless we bring the institutional changes, it may not be sustained the impact that we are doing. So systematic inputs and the systematic way of forward would be the starting with the heat action plan as under the broader framework of the risk-informed master planning. Over to you.
Thank you very much. So before we go to the Q&A, and there's a Slido where you can put in your Q&A, I just want to ask each one of our panelists to give in one sentence what their suggestion would be for building women's resilience to heat stress. So maybe a few words. So I'll start with you. Yes.
Building resilience
of women to heat stress
educate
in
them,
one sentence.
Educate them, ensure that our early warning for all has women and gender in the center. So countries with the early warning systems have 8 times lesser, disaster-related mortalities as compared to the countries who do not have that. So ensuring that women and gender is in the center of the early warning systems is heat early warning system, not just health, is something should be prioritized. Yeah.
He always says everything. Yes, I agree. I think women, education is so important, as I said, education and awareness when it comes to building heat resilience, but also making that, I think it's also about making that participation possible, recognizing that the barriers that they have, whether it's through family, society, income, but creating that pathway so that whatever awareness or education that they're receiving, they can actually use it.
Okay, so Anna, over to you.
Thank you. I totally agree with what's already been said, but I'd like to add that I think it's really important to empower women and empower Indigenous knowledge and give the chance for women to particularly be brought to the table to make those political decisions and changes that we need to see going forward.
Thank you very much. Lakshmi?
I would like to have 3 suggestions at the 3 level. One is the gender responsive local government to understand the value of the difficulties and the things of the humans and the vulnerable groups. Second, as an individual level, is the awareness and economic empowerment. Once they are stronger on the economy, they can be really manage to access to the health, educations, and everything. The awareness will come forward. And then the third is the community level, the increase the social capital. That is very important to support system at the community level to manage the heat stress at the community level through the indigenous knowledge. Just like in Nepal, they used to have a mud kind of and the trees and the community parks, and they can maintain together. So 3-level recommendation for that one. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Lakshmi. Let's, if we can give our panelists a hand. I can't clap. Thank you. So we have an opportunity to now go to questions from the audience. If we could have the Slido. Okay. So we have, I can see sort of 3 questions. If you have a question, please type it in or vote for the question that you would like to have answered. The first question is, what role do traditional knowledge and practices play in developing? Oh, it's gone. Oh, it's now the second one. Okay. You're busy voting. And practices play in developing gender responsive solutions for communities facing heat related challenges. So, who would like to take that first question? Do you want to take it?
Okay.
Yeah.
In fact, in our recent work in Jodhpur, and I must thank, we all must thank, while Lakshmi and even Anna was talking about, we should have the local organizations and local groups be part of the heat action plans. Uh, a huge thanks to the partners that we work with, particularly Mahila Housing Trust that we are working with, which is a women-driven organization working on the improvement of life and livelihood and living conditions of women living in these slum households. My friend, Ms. Bhavna Ben is already here. So thank you so much for the tremendous, excellent work. If these are the organizations who can really take the work to the grassroots levels, and they know the traditional, such organizations know what is traditional, like what are the cultural practices, what is the contemporary and cultural practices. So it is important. You can't just go with a solution of America to the India and say that, just accept it. No, that's not gonna work. So you have to have the local solutions, local as in hyper local. In country like India, there is so much of diversity. Our food practices change when we, travel 100 kilometers. Our language, our dialects change when we travel 100 kilometers. So imagine, what the cultural practices would be. So it has to be driven from the local knowledge. That is very important. And that's why community and community organizations like Mahila Housing Trust and others should be part of development and implementation of heat action plans. It shouldn't be, if somebody can just pull up the slide, the second picture in my presentation, where you can see we just recently visited. One of the solutions that in the heat action plan that we are offering is cool roof, right? Which is otherwise also a traditional practice in India, not maybe in terms of white roof paint, which are now available, got available recently, but there were several other practices. One of the slum houses that we visited, their experience, and these are lived experiences. So when we visited to, just do a recce and, our next phase of implementation of such interventions, the women in that slum households told us that, after deploying or after, applying this cool roof paint, we are, it's obviously helping them in providing better indoor thermal comfort during day, providing energy, saving the energy cost for the cooling, but it is also helping them in sleeping on the terrace during night. And they don't have to pour water to cool down the surface during summer. I'm talking about summer. And summer in India is very harsh, right? So usually what you have to do is, if your surface rooftop is not, cool roof, then you might have to pour water to cool it down, and then you can sleep if you want to sleep on terrace. But after applying this cool roof paint, they don't even have to pour water. They can just, spread their bed sheets and they can sleep there. So it is also saving water. So there are many co-benefits which we can learn from the traditional practices if we work closely with the communities. Yeah.
Thank you very much. I'm always reminded in my own country, I come originally from Central America, and our traditional buildings were thick, adobe mud walls, which kept, our houses cool. And so I think some of these sort of passive cooling traditional buildings are things that are actually being explored now in order for us to, address some of these issues related to housing and heat stress. So I think we have time for one more. Lakshmi, I saw your hand up. I don't know if you wanted to also respond to this question.
So what I want, it's not the responding. I just want to share like that. Like for example, India, some of the cities and the Tarai of the Nepal might have experience of the Pakistan, other countries. But in some of the communities, which used to be the cold settlements, temperature was a cool. They don't have any indigenous knowledge about managing the increase in temperature. So what I want to stress is that we need to document from other countries or the other places where the rising temperatures are there, where there is the practices are there. The cross learning with the other countries or the other communities has to be there. So we may not be able to find the indigenous knowledge for managing the heat stress in particular towns could be, but they are already started to experience with a small 1 degree increase can affect their livelihood. Thank you.
Thank you, and that's a really interesting point because earlier when Shaila spoke, she spoke about the cyclone resistant housing. I believe that it was in Vanuatu, where it's more resistant than sort of traditional building materials. So I think that's a really important point, sort of learning from the experience of other countries. So we only have time, unfortunately, for one more question, and I will just read it and see who would like to answer. So in addition to specific practical solutions, wouldn't this also need more large-scale and systematic solutions connected to urban planning and public housing? So who would like to take that?
Yes, absolutely. We would need more large-scale and systemic solutions. So I'm going to go back to Dhaka North. Traditionally, we used to have houses with very thick walls and small windows. This was done to keep heat out and for the houses to keep cool in the summer. Now, if any of you've ever been in Dhaka, you'll know that all buildings have like glass everywhere. And their air conditioning is always running, even in the winter. This really contributes to the urban heat island effect. There is the buildings, modern buildings aren't designed with natural ventilation in mind. As opposed to there's a hospital in Dhaka that's still, it's called Holy Family or Holy something, but there's a hospital that I used to go to as a child, and it's still the same today. And even in the summer, they don't need to use air conditioning because they have water systems that's running underneath the floors and high ceilings. So even in the summer, when you enter the building, you feel cool, while everybody else outside is really suffering. So when we're thinking of building our heat action plan, we're really trying to include all of these systemic solutions that have to do with urban planning. Like this is part of the building code problem. And then, but regarding public housing, it really matters. It really depends on the kind of government you have and the kind of resources that they have. For example, not all the time is public housing the better solution, I would say. Sometimes they are moved, people are forced to move from their houses, places like informal settlements, to public housing that's much far away, and then they have to walk all the way back to their place of work without any access to transportation. These public housings are not that well maintained. So unless you can guarantee transportation, livelihood, and what was the other thing? Oh yes, waste management, which is a thing. Like there's a settlement in how much time do I have? Okay, just this one thing. There was a settlement which we visited, and the National Housing Authority were just handing over to a large section of the informal settlement families, like apartment blocks. And even though it looked nice in theory, you could see that there was absolutely no waste management. And it was like open landfills everywhere. And they had been complaining about this for a long time because it's like a toxic hotspot for women and children and all the animals that scavenge there. And kids are like playing there all the time. And no matter how many times they complained, nobody picked that garbage up until there was an event by the National Housing Authority on one day, and they cleaned it up overnight and pretended that that problem never existed. So again, the key is, I feel, governance. Good governance can help help people, vulnerable people especially, adapt to these risks and these disasters so effectively if we push for that.
Thank you. So Anna or Lakshmi, would you like to respond quickly to that question? It's more around urban infrastructure, large scale. Wouldn't this also need more large scale systemic solutions connected to urban planning?
Definitely, it's more about addressing the heat island, and also this building code, as they mentioned earlier. So building code, because the construction materials is really the important one to managing or it is emitting the heats also, right? And also the wind flow towards the city from north, south, or the wind, that has to be. So all these things has to be captured into the urban plans. So now increasingly we are seeing in the ADB's interventions with the climate change assessment, we have a component on the risk-informed master planning. Risk means from the all level of a climate change hazards and the other disasters, but the heat has to be come up with more prominently, could be, or the one of the item it can be derived on. So another thing is the decarbonizations, maybe with the vehicles use, public transportation vis-a-vis, because it also create add to the increasing in the temperature, naturally increasing as well the people induced behavior increase also. So not only the limiting to the awareness raising, lots of the cross cuttings and the more systematic way of addressing heat stress through the urban planning is very important.
Thank you very much. Unfortunately, we have run out of time, and I really feel that in many ways we've just began to, scratch the surface on many of these issues, and there's many directions that we should be taking this conversation forward around health, around urban planning, around sort of better coordination with health systems and so on. So I think certainly this conversation is really to be continued. And I really want to thank our panelists for getting this conversation started. Thank you, Bushra, thank you, Abhiyan, and as well as Anna and Lakshmi for joining us online. We do have the responses to our earlier sort of Slido question, which was how are increasing and longer heat waves impacting your country and community? And so, we have, it's hot, health effects, food and livelihoods, seasonal changes, crop failures, and so there's quite a few ways in which the heat waves are having an impact in your country or community. If we could go to the next poll question. And then, have you personally observed or experienced any gender-based differences in the impact of heat stress on individuals? And I think it's interesting that most of you have. And this is great because it means that we have a room full of people that are already aware of the importance of this issue and that we need to work together to address it. So it's not a great situation, but it is important that we have, almost 60% of you that have observed that there is a difference. And I think there's one more question, I'm not sure. Nope. That's it. So in terms of feedback, we ask you to give us feedback on this session and the other sessions of the day, and you can provide your feedback on Slido. So I will hand it over to my colleague, Jina Kim, who will be sharing with us some of the key takeaways that came out from both the session on agriculture as well as this session. So over to you, Jina.
Thank you, Johnny. Thank you, Johnny, and the speakers. Well, it has been a long day, and we have had a lot of information. So I see the exciting faces over here. So let me just, I'm supposed to remind you of our survey at the end of my remarks. However, let me just gently remind you with a little bit of excitement that you will get ice cream if you participate in the survey. So now I see some smiley faces over here. Okay, it's going to be a very short, just reflection on our discussions. So today we had a discussion on a very critical issue that demands our urgent attention: gender-responsive climate change adaptation, particularly focusing on climate resilient agriculture and heat stress. So today, when we go back, I would like to think, what we can do to address these issues. So let me just quickly summarize, the key takeaways focusing on way forward. So the impact of climate change are not gender neutral, and women, particularly those in vulnerable environments, are disproportionately affected. Women are often at the forefront of agriculture production in Asian Pacific region, yet they face significant barriers to accessing resources, technologies, and decision-making processes. This makes them more vulnerable to the adverse effect of climate change, such as extreme weather. We just discussed extreme heat waves, and also water scarcity and food insecurity. So to address these issues effectively, we discussed that we should make continued efforts to collect more data, and we should address the gaps in research areas to better understand the vulnerability of women in agriculture sector. And also, we should make efforts to create enabling environments for women to utilize their inherited knowledge and engage them into climate resilient agriculture value chains equally. And also, they should be able to participate in decision-making processes. Finally, for agriculture sector, we should actively address the issues related to social and gender norms that hinder women's participation in the economic activities in the agriculture sector, and therefore we should adopt the gender transformative approach. We just discussed the gender and heat stress issues. Women are particularly vulnerable to heat stress due to their biological and social factors. There is a limited understanding of gendered impacts of heat stress and how potential solutions can and should take women's needs into account. Therefore, we should make joint efforts to collect more data again and conduct more research to develop more gender-responsive development planning, taking into consideration of heat stress. Also, this needs to be informed for our investment decisions. Second, innovative technologies should be adopted to provide services tailored for women, enhancing their resilience to heat stress. So finally, I would like to reiterate that women should be taken into consideration as a change agent, not as only beneficiaries. So recognizing women as key stakeholders and agent of change is crucial. Women contribute significantly to sustainable development and possess unique knowledge, skills, and innovative solutions for climate change adaptation. Let me reiterate that gender-responsive climate change adaptation is not just a matter of equity or fairness. It is necessity for ensuring the resilience and sustainability of our communities and economies. By empowering women and addressing the gender dimensions of climate change adaptation, we can build a more just and equitable future for all of us. So this is the end of the closing remarks. I hope it didn't make you fall asleep. And now you are invited to join the survey and get the ice cream. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Sonny, and our amazing panelists. Thank you, Gina, for that excellent summary of our theme too. We are getting close. We have one more item on our agenda. So to give us a summary of our entire day, you know Tofu Creatives have been illustrating every single session since this morning, so we of course need to hear from them. So over to you, Tofu Creatives. Are they? Oh.
Hello, everyone. I'm Desiree from Tofu Creative. So, all day long, Nitya and I have been listening and illustrating this. So, I'll be providing a quick visual journey of today's session. So, for the opening, we heard the messages that we must create opportunities for women to lead, and that women are not only half our population, but they can also be half the solution to the climate crisis. And some of the issues that we're looking at COP28 would be progress on loss and damage, mechanisms to support direct finance access for women, advance a just and equitable energy transition. And 2 billion women and girls can act as a solution multiplier. And over to our first theme, women in the energy transition. We listened to the messages of how women's access to clean and affordable, sustainable energy as a key enabler of economic development. And from the panel, how important women's networks of entrepreneurs are, and women really find strength in community, how technology can be a springboard for gender initiatives, and also how energy access can also provide better learning opportunities. And over to our case studies, the importance of women's involvement in energy transition programs, looking at gaps and opportunities for women's climate leadership, and supporting participation upstream and downstream. And from Singapore, we heard people, planet, and economic viability, and also building global momentum for meaningful participation of women and youth. And for climate adaptation theme on driving climate resilient agriculture, we heard the message that farmers are not just men, they are also women, how technology can be a driver for change, to be bold, do more, use your voice, how women and inclusive technologies can equate to transformative increased resilience. And over to the panel, how it has been important to learn from each other's experience, featuring success stories, consulting women in project design, and beyond gender gaps, address the root causes of marginalization and discrimination. And from Chiang Mai, we heard how they created innovative products to diversify income. And from Ranjita, we heard about their project on identifying the hotspots for where the most vulnerable women are and how we can target investments for them. And over to the most recent panel, how there are still gaps in research and there is a need for evidence-based interventions. Heat affects women differently, and how heat action plans are really important in identifying early warning systems, how better heat governance is needed, and how we also need transformational interventions. Thank you, everyone, for letting us co-create the big picture with all of you. These are all a work in progress, so we'll be sharing the final ones with you as we go along. Thank you.
Wow, thank you so much. That was really nice to see all the information that we learned since this morning. It was really helpful, especially for me, to kind of visually see everything, so hope it was the same for you all.
We're only asking Tofu Creative. We're only asking Tofu Creative where we are. We didn't see ourselves up there, Marla.
Yeah.
We've been moderating. Okay. Yeah. It's not working? Okay. Should I repeat the joke for everyone? No. Okay.
Well, thank you to all our moderators, speakers, panelists who made this a great day of learning and knowledge exchange. We still have one more day to go, but thank you also to our audience for asking your questions, staying engaged. I know some of you are really jet lagged, so we really appreciate your participation. And thank you, of course, to our amazing creative geniuses at Tofu Creatives again. Before we all go, Jenna alluded to this earlier, we do have one final ask from you. We have a QR code to Slido, which you know by now. And we really hope that you can take the time to fill out our day 1 evaluation forms. To sweeten the deal, we are bribing you with ice cream, so ice cream is not free. You have to fill out the evaluation form and show the screenshot to claim your cone. And we have 4 different flavors representing each one of our theme. So you have plenty of options to choose from, and I really hope you can try the ube flavor, which is from here in the Philippines.
My personal favorite is mango, but let's not argue about that right now.
Yes.
I've also been told that an illustration that Tofu Creative has created will be in your inboxes soon, so you don't need to take pictures of that. So today, what a great day it's been. What has been amazing is to see the room almost full, as it was in the morning. Usually events that we host in the morning, it kind of dips, but your energy is amazing, and these national costumes are fantastic. We really, really appreciate that. What a great day it's been. We hope you will bring the same energy tomorrow, 9 a.m., and I'm going to do my moderator voice. Same place, same time, in this auditorium tomorrow at 9 a.m., where we will be having more discussions around the private sector and gender, as well as how do you transition into a more green economy. Now, let's kick off those shoes and enjoy the cocktail reception right outside at the ADB courtyard, where we have a special treat for all of you. The ADB Guitar Ensemble will be serenading you with tunes of the holiday to make sure that you enjoy and get to know one another much better. So thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. Fantastic day today. Thank you.
Thank you. Enjoy your evening.
Kick off our shoes to the corral.